Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome back to the Daily Southampton and today the Daily Fulham, part of the Global Sports Podcast Network. My name is Greg Elliott and today joined by my colleague from the Daily Fulham podcast, Gavin. How you doing, mate? You alright?
I'm alright, Greg. Thanks for having me on. How are you doing yourself?
Yeah, not too bad. Now, we're heading into a fixture at the weekend at St Mary's against Fulham. For us, we've been calling this our sort of pre-season building towards next year, and it's sort of a bit of a dead rubber for you guys as well, right? Not a lot of movement up or down you guys can do at the moment.
Well, I mean, you say that. There is an interesting little... It's probably not interesting to most fans of other clubs, but there is a little subplot about the race for Europe because of the success of teams in England this season in European competition. It looks like 8th place will secure Europa Conference League football for next season. So there is a little battle there between Fulham, Brighton, Bournemouth and Brentford at the minute. But it looks like most of those teams don't want to get in it, judging by their form.
Yeah, that is interesting. I actually didn't know about that 8th place going up for grabs. I guess that does give you something to really fight for at the end of the season. But yeah, so I mean, is that what you guys are hoping? A nice couple of European away days, would that be good? Or do you think that the extra fixtures that might impose would sort of hamper your chances next year?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, isn't it? I think 10, 15 years ago, there might have been a different answer. I think a lot of teams probably wanted to avoid European football because they know what the knock-on effect it had in the league for the following season. But I feel like Fulham are an established Premier League side now that even with the European trips on Thursday nights, they feel they could cope. Obviously, as Southampton have found out this season, the challenge from stepping up to the Premier League from the Championship is one that's getting increasingly difficult. So it'll be the same next season where the three promoted teams will be the favourites to go back down. So there is that, I suppose, reassurance from that, that you can combine Europe with the Premier League. So yeah, there's no doubt that Fulham fans will all want to get back in Europe next season. And of course, they have happy memories from there in the past when they did get to the final, albeit of the Europa League back in 2010. So yeah, the form a little bit worrying at the minute, but as I said earlier, some of
patchy, right? Like it's struggling to string anything together and build momentum from what
it's been like that all season. They've not won any more than 2 games at a time. Well, that's the thing that's held them back, and that's probably why they are where they are. And Marco Silva says it every week that they should have more points than they do, but ultimately the sides that are contending for those Champions League places, they've just been able at one point or another to string a run of wins together, which Fulham haven't been able to. Up until the Chelsea game last week, it was win, lose, win, lose, win, lose. And then it finally ended that streak where they lost back-to-back games in the most terrible fashion, agonising way, losing in the 93rd minute. So there's been no real momentum, but there is something to play for in the last 5 games. So, and also, I've said this before, the chance of breaking their points tally for the Premier League, which stands at 53. So it would almost be disappointing if they were to not surpass that at this stage now.
Yeah, that's not a million miles away. And I suppose coming into the weekend, you've got to almost think that that's given based on our form coming into the game compared to yours.
Well, that's the problem in itself because Fulham, if you remember back to the game at Craven Cottage, they would have gone into that game as heavy favourites, and then it was a 0-0 draw, very insipid performance. They didn't have many chances in the whole game, to tell the truth. So that's where Fulham have come unstuck this season almost, is in these sort of games where they are expected to win, where there is an emphasis on them. They have come unstuck, and it's actually the results in the games where you don't expect them to do well in, where they've kind of surprised you, which is epitomised by that performance against Liverpool a couple of weeks ago, defeating them, just the second team to do that this season. So these sorts of games comes with their pitfalls for Fulham. So I don't think any Fulham fan will be counting their chickens ahead of this one.
Do you think that's like a mentality thing? Because like just not getting as like mentally prepared and built up or excited for the game? Or do you think that that's just them sort of struggling to break down teams that tend to sit back a bit more and play with a bit less an attacking threat and park the bus a bit?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a combination of that. They do seem to struggle against those sides that sit in 10 men behind the ball, struggle to break them down. At times there's been a lack of creativity, but I also think there's been an element of complacency. Maybe they're approaching these games with the wrong attitude. Sometimes the atmosphere at Craven Cottage for these games has been a little bit flat, which then has a knock-on effect. The players don't feel so up for it, or maybe it's just the case there is that complacency and they feel all they have to do is turn up and win the game. And in the Premier League, every result is earned, not given to you. So yeah, as I said, there is disappointment in that. But as a Premier League footballer, the intensity needs to be there for all the games, not just be able to turn it on, turn it off like a tap, not just get yourself up for the big games. The games against Southampton and those teams near the bottom end of the table is just as important.
Absolutely. Every game counts, and we've learnt that the hard way this season, that's for sure. I guess where's going to hurt us coming into the weekend, though? What's the main... Who's the main player that needs to sort of hit the ground and find a bit of form to put us away? Where are the goals coming from?
Well, I would like to see Rodrigo Muniz come back into the team. He's hit a bit of a purple patch recently. He was missing for the last game against Chelsea, and I think it was actually a big loss for Fulham because Raul Jimenez, he started the game quite well, but then he faded quite quickly. He gassed early in the second half, and I think it was the fact that Fulham didn't have a great option off the bench. They're Carlos Vinicius, who's not been seen for the best part of a year. So the fact that he was on the bench, it meant that Marco Silva wasn't able to change things up a bit earlier. So hopefully we will see Rodrigo Muniz come back into the fold. And also, I think I'm very excited the fact that Harry Wilson is back fit. He did get some minutes off the bench in the last game, so maybe he might be someone that's pushing for a start. Iwobi as well. There's been some criticism about Alex Iwobi recently about maybe a little bit of a drop-off in the second half of the season, because I feel like the first half of the season he was Fulham's standout player, but he has scored a couple of goals recently in the last two games at home, so I think he's someone you got to look out for as well.
That was too many names. I think there's always a risk, I guess, of coming into it and feeling like we're in trouble. But that has been the case most of the season. But do you think that it is the game where they sort of break that streak of, obviously we sort of ground out the draw in the away leg, but do you think you've got that in you to sort of go one past that and put us away?
I think so, because I think unlike the game at Craven Cottage, Southampton playing at home and they got nothing really to play for. Okay, they want to get past 11 points, don't they? So they don't want to. They're currently joint worst Premier League team of all time, along with Derby County. They don't want to be in that conversation at all, do they? So they will open up a bit in front of their own fans. So that should play into Fulham's favour. So I know we'll talk about the game itself a little bit in the third part, but I think Fulham, just as long as the intensity level's there, I think they've got a good chance, really, of stemming this loss in form, which has been four defeats in 5 in all competitions. So, look, if they can't beat Southampton this season, then they don't deserve to qualify for Europe, to be quite honest.
That hurts to hear, but it actually feels pretty reasonable. Okay, we'll switch seats round and talk a bit about Southampton last season. But first, a message from our partners at Bionic.
Your body is unique. And Global Sports Podcast Network has partnered with Bionic, the world's most personalised supplements. Bionic provide 100% tailor-made supplements designed to deliver precisely what your body needs at exactly the right levels to optimise your health. No guessing. So click the link in the show notes. Use the code GSPN2025 for 40% off your first month's subscription. Bionic. Don't settle for off-the-shelf solutions made for just anybody. Get what's right for you right now. Your body.
Okay, and we are back. Okay, Gavin, I'm gonna hand the reins over to you and let you ask me some questions about our horrendous season.
Okay, Greg. So I want to come on to the guy who's in charge for the weekend, and he was actually in charge for the game earlier on the season. That's I'm not sure what his role is, caretaker manager, and that's Simon Russ. What do you think the future holds for him? Does he want the job? I mean, if Southampton are to eke out a couple of wins in the last few games, is there a chance that they might look to keep him on beyond this season?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. It's one I don't know if even the board have the answer to. I think the problem is that, the position we're in is the culmination of a lot of bad decisions from our board and more mistakes. I think bad decisions might be misselling it. Attempts to do right that have not gone well. And, we saw him in his first game in charge against you away, and he sort of got a point there. And since he's come back in, he's just doing the basics right. He's just playing players in the positions they're strong in and getting them to play football in a natural way, which is really where we've struggled the rest of the season, trying to crowbar these players into systems that they're just not built for. I think that if he is given, if he does get the results this season, I don't know if it will be a popular decision to keep him on, not as manager, not as a reflection on him, but as a reflection and as it wouldn't show the sort of willpower from the board that I think we want, that to get ourselves back to that place where we're like a confirmed Premier League team, solidified in the league where we were for so many years before this sort of up and down tumultuous period. I just think it would be lacking in vision. I definitely think he will do himself well to stay in and around the team if he serves well. You know, him and Adam Lallana has been brought on as his assistant. I think it will set them in good strength to be around the first team. But you know, he's come up from our under-21s as the under-21s manager. I just don't think that low level of experience is enough to match the vision that the fans have.
Interesting. And it's the second season in a row, isn't it? We've seen the 3 teams that come up from the Championship go straight back down. I know Ipswich haven't been confirmed, but they're as good as down, aren't they? And then again, we've seen Burnley go straight back up, and there's every chance that Sheffield United might follow them as well in the playoffs. So it looks like that gap between the Premier League and Championship is getting bigger. What do you think it takes to bridge that gap? Do you feel like Southampton should have gone for it a bit more? Because I know Nottingham Forest took a lot of criticism a couple of seasons ago for their kind of reckless spending and just buying any player they set their mind on. And look, they took a bit of a hit last season with a points deduction, but they were always comfortable in their fight for survival. And you look where they are now. Does it almost take that aggressive spending and being ruthless in the market, not being so loyal to ultimately survive in this league?
Yeah, I mean, I think they took a gamble, and I don't think it's a gamble that our owners are going to put themselves in a position to do. I don't know if it's fair to say that's what it takes, but I definitely think that the margins of error are much finer, right? Like, you need to make solid signings and all of them need to come good. And I think we've talked a lot about where it's gone wrong this season, and a lot of it is from that transfer activity. And we were busy and we bought quite a lot in the summer, but the problem is that a very small percentage of that worked out. I think we've got maybe as many as 3.5, let's say, signings that have really sort of played out and come well. And, you know, but we at the same time we bought in players like Bembert and Diaz and Maxwell Cornet, who, you know, Cornet got sent back to West Ham in January off the loan, and Bembert and Diaz, who we bought, is out on loan at Sheffield United. So it's been fractious, and I think instead of sort of hedging, I think the risk-free version is what they were playing for by trying to sign lots of these players for relatively cheap and, you know, see what sticks. Whereas I think it's more important to sign a couple of really good players that can really do the job. You know, we need a goal scorer, really, realistically. Like, it was all well and good spending £26 million on Aaron Ramsdale to play in goal for us, but that was never going to be the saving grace of our season. And it was such a risk-free purchase, because you know that you're going to be able to sell him for at least that much at the end of the season when we go down. So we need to take a couple of big risks, and that doesn't mean like put ourselves in risk of points deduction level of risk, but there definitely needs to be some big spending to get back to that position for sure.
So just following on from that, do you think the club have learned lessons then that ultimately would help prepare them better if they were to bounce straight back up?
That's the hope. There's been an acknowledgement from the board that they really let things slip. We've had a change on the board. A couple of members have stepped down, and the new chairman, the main investors, stepped up. We've brought in a director of football, which, you know, we did at the start of our championship campaign, you know, last season. And then he got poached and sent off to Man United, and then we never replaced him and never really set in stone a proper footballing structure. I think if you speak to any Saints fan, they'll say that the business side of the club has been doing all right. We've got new fan zones, we've got a new pub, and all of we turned a profit this year for the first time in sort of 6 years. But the football side has really been where the failings have occurred, and there's hope that this new director of football will sort of imprint that vision. He's already been out in the press and taken ownership and taken responsibility and said that sort of the buck stops with him and it's his responsibility to guide that vision. So I think there's hope that that's what they've learned and that it can be picked up from there, but it's still an unproven hope, I guess, is the thing. You can hope they learn from the mistakes, but there's just as much of a chance they might still make the same ones again.
So just in terms of the playing staff, are you expecting a mass overhaul in terms of players coming in and going out? Or do you expect the squad you have now to form the nucleus for next season?
I think we're going to have a huge overhaul. I think there are going to be players that want to go that don't get to go. I think we've got a very bloated squad of a lot of players who have been trying to go for a long time. And I think we're going to be seeing a lot of that come into play. To me, I think when we think about it, it's important to keep 3 or 4 really key players, but beyond that, I'm open to a complete clear out and start again, to be honest. We've got a few good players coming back off loan who will help bolster us to the Championship next season, and hopefully as a sort of longer term project across the 2 years, we can start building something together that can make a slightly less feeble attempt at the Premier League the year after, fingers crossed.
Yeah. So if you're being honest and realistic, if you're looking at the current crop of players you have, hand on heart, how many of those players do you genuinely think are actually Premier League quality?
I think maybe 4, and if you're including with the potential to become solidly Premier League quality, maybe as many as 6. But it's not a high number for sure. I did see something this morning about Troy Deeney thinks there's only 2 players of the entire 72 in the bottom 3 that would make it, and I think that might be slightly harsh, but yeah, it's not high numbers.
Yeah, and just finally, I know we spoke about him, didn't we, earlier on in the season, about your youngster Diblin, and I think I've seen some quotes about certain prices about him going to other clubs. Do you feel like if he did go to, I don't know, one of the top 6 or top 7 clubs in the country, that it could kind of hinder his progress, or do you generally feel like he could go into one of those clubs and make a name for himself?
I genuinely think that a year in the Championship with us would do him the world of good. I think that at the start of the season under Russell Martin, he was really sort of showing where he was coming strength to strength and hitting the ground running. He really struggled under Juric, and I don't know whether that was sort of a personality clash or a real clash with the system and the style, but he really struggled to find real form under that. He's sort of seen him starting to try and get back strength to strength in this sort of pre-season era. But yeah, the £100 million price tag we've put on him, I think that's more a statement of intent to keep than anything else, to be honest. Obviously, he's got so much potential, and he could just step into a team like that and make tracks. But I think if you look at how young players with that potential have been treated in the past by clubs like that, really the more likely outcome would be that he'd just get lost in the sea out there somewhere and fall away into sort of obscurity and struggle with that path to the first team. Whereas, I think a year in the Championship with us would give him a chance to really hone those skills where there are parts of his game where he really needs to improve and still do him good and set him in a good frame for after that. But that might just be the rose-tinted glasses of hoping that he stays with us for another year, to be honest.
Yeah, and my last question is, well, obviously you've suffered a lot this season, haven't you? It might sound like a bit of a daft question. Do you want to come back up next season?
Yeah, that's it's a tough one to answer. I think that the reality is that squandering in the middle of the Championship is probably just as not fun as suffering at the bottom of the Premier League. And there's a very real chance that if you don't make it back up in that first season before those parachute payments stop, after the sort of going down and coming back up, then there's a real risk of falling lower than that. So I think it is important to come back up. I think it's just important that we make a proper project of it. It doesn't necessarily need to be straight away. If the cost of doing it properly and coming back and giving it a fighting chance is another year in the Championship after the next season, then so be it. We need to do that. But yeah, the Premier League always needs to be the goal.
No, I completely agree with that. You always want to get there, don't you? You've seen the euphoric scenes from Leeds and Burnley over the last couple of days, and then I'm just thinking to myself, well, fast forward 12 months, how differently they could be, and they might regret coming up in a weird sort of way. But whenever you're presented with a chance of playing in the Premier League, you're never going to turn it down, are you?
Yeah. And you've got to suffer these lows of being a football fan to really enjoy the highs. There's no fun being a Man City fan where you win everything all the time. You've got to suffer through these dark periods to make the trips to Wembley and all the other good stuff that comes with it worth it. Right, lovely. Well, that leads us nicely into our second break and a message from our partners at Zencastr. Here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform. Zencastr came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description and learn more about Zencastr. Okay, so let's turn our eyes a bit more to the weekend and the game at hand. How do you see it playing out? Yeah.
I think if Fulham take the game seriously, and they should, because there is something still to play for, and those players will want to play in Europe next season, they probably think, I can play in European football, and obviously with that comes the extra demands, as we've already stated, but I feel like if Fulham show the correct intensity and application to this game, then they should come away with 3 points.
And how many do you think it'll be by then as a win?
I think Fulham, the away form as well has just tapered off recently. I think they've lost the last 3 away from home after going quite a long period without losing on the road. So they'll want to put that right as well. So I feel like this is the ideal opportunity to do that. So I think they'll score 3. And then it's whether or not they can keep the back door shut. I think we'll give Southampton a goal. I think 3-1 Fulham will come out winners.
I think that might work out to be our average scoreline across the entire season, to be honest, a 3-1 loss. It certainly feels that way. Yeah, it'll be an interesting game for us. I think the players have shown that even though there's this sort of strange, like I alluded to it, of being a pre-season feeling, there is some sort of fight in them that there really wasn't under the last manager. I think it will be a low-scoring affair, to be honest. Simon Rusk has made it pretty clear that his ideal football game would be to not concede a goal, and that's how you win.
Makes sense, that, doesn't
it? Yeah. If you keep a clean sheet, you're guaranteed to get something out of the game, I think is what he said in the press conference. So I think it will be a rather cagey affair. But I think, look, I haven't predicted a Saints loss all season, so I'm horribly in the red when it comes to to these decisions. But I just feel like our home form has been so atrocious that we also need to put a stamp on it and start putting things right. And I think that maybe a slightly painful 1-0 win is the way we're going to do it. Maybe we'll get a goal early on in the first sort of 20-25 minutes and then just have a horrible defensive, like a win at home that no one enjoys would just be so on brand for the entire season, to be honest.
Well, I mean, to be fair, Southampton do come into this game in form. They are 1 game unbeaten.
Yeah. You said earlier in the show, actually, that you guys sort of struggled to string 2 wins together in a row, and that was the downfall of your season. And I have looked, and obviously we've only won 2 games all season, so it is different levels for sure. It'll be interesting to see how it goes, but yeah, I think when I think back to that away fixture, that they really put a lot of effort into shutting up shop and taking away those opportunities. So I feel like that's exactly how we'll go into this. And yeah, maybe we'll trip over the ball and get it in the goal somehow, and defend away for the rest of our lives through the game. That's potentially how I see it going.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. I think there's one thing you can say about your interim, your your caretaker manager, whatever you want to call it. He seems like, okay, he's not certainly made these players better than what they are, but he's at least made them a little bit tougher to beat, as we saw in the game last week against West Ham. And obviously they showed great spirit to get an equalising goal in stoppage time. And just looking back to the game earlier on the season where they were very tough to break down. So maybe if they had shown that a bit more application and difficultness, if that's a word, to beat, then they would have had more points than they currently do now.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to be said for sticking to the basics and playing football, how football's supposed to be played, and sort of playing players in their best decisions. I guess it also helps when we sort of play with a back five and two holding midfielders. That's a lot of space taken up that's quite hard to break down, so you can see how that would be more solid. It's definitely our forward options that are much more of a concern, to be honest, and not many of them. So,
do you see him making changes from last week, or what's the team news? Do you have any injuries?
Nothing, none that I've heard of. I think that it will be foolish to change it, to be honest. I think it will be sticking with more or less the same, and maybe, depending on how the game flows out, maybe bringing on some of the youngsters towards the end is what we've seen happen a couple of times in the last couple of games. So, but we'll see. Like you say, getting over that 11-point mark, as much as the manager plays it down, it is important. The players have said it's important. It's and it's only 1 point away. So realistically, if that 1 point comes from eking out a 0-0 in a painful performance, it's still over the line. So yeah, I think that's how we'll see it play. But yeah, it could. So I don't paint a particularly entertaining picture of the game there. Sorry, hopefully not downhearting anyone from what's bound to be a very exciting game of football at the weekend for sure.
But as you said, you've been mostly wrong all season, so we might see a 5-4 thriller here then.
That's true. 5-4's on the cards. That's always about. As long as it's the joy of a 93rd minute winner for us, that's fine. That's a perfectly reasonable outcome. I don't think that we've scored 5 goals all season. So, in fact, our top goal scorer is Paul Wahonachu, who's managed to score 4. So, this pretty worrying stuff. But absolutely. Well, that is just about all we've got time for today. Gavin, thank you very much for joining me. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll be back tomorrow with our respective previews, I'm sure. Until then, see you then.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.